Hello, and welcome to a special edition of FPL Expectations with me, FPL Mariner. So, as you know, we do our regular weekly shows, but we thought we'd do something a little bit different for you. And tonight we've got a very special guest, somebody who I've got to know fairly well in the last few months. He's from, he works with me on the FPL, the Road to Global Glory blog. And also he works with FPL Crypto in, I'll put my teeth in for this, the 6 Picks contest. And it's none other than Gabriel, AKA FPL Lens. Welcome, mate.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Chris. Really nice to be here. I've been kind of looking forward to this, really excited for this all week because when you presented this idea, I just, when I got to learn about your process a little bit, it kind of just exploded in my head. So I love this. Thanks for the invitation.
No, fabulous. It's really great to have you. And thank you very much for joining at, I think, 7 o'clock in the morning in LA.
7 o'clock, bright and early. The sun is just starting to peak up right now.
Yeah, you're looking a lot better than me at 11 o'clock at night in Singapore, I'll tell you. It's probably the age as well. I don't know. I don't quite know. But anyway, just for the benefit of the viewers, the idea that we had was to create a tutorial into the thought process of your specialty, which is matchups, I would like to say. You know, I'm very vocal about how much I enjoy them. And then really try to get some help and give some help to the viewers as to your thought process and how perhaps you can also apply it, or they can apply it, I should say, into their own games. Now, just for the benefit of the audience, we will be taking questions, but it will be at the end. And we really do want you to give questions specifically around what the topic tonight, which is matchups and also statistics. So do leave them on the side. We'll get to them later. And let's dive in. So, okay. So the first thing to do then is let's talk to Gabe. And what's your driving force, Gabe, behind matchups? You know, how did you get there?
So it's I really only started playing FPL about 2.5 seasons ago. So I'm not really a seasoned vet or anything like that. I played casually and quit a couple times. But as I got more into it, it became apparent to me that there was the way that I'm a coach first and foremost. I have my USSF, United States Soccer Federation B license. I've coached, you know, from 6-year-olds, actually from 3-year-olds all the way through semi-pro. Played through all those levels as well. So one thing that was frustrating for me in playing FPL, like I would see how much people are into it and how deep they get in their analysis and how much really just people know about football, and that was inspiring to me. And then I saw the FDR, and it was such a kind of two-dimensional way of looking at the game. Because when I watch the game, I watch it with that coaching lens, and I'm looking at these individual matchups in the field. And then when I would go to plan my FPL team, I couldn't kind of rely on those observations, because I'd look at the FDR and, you know, it would just be red or a gray or a green. So it's very much two-dimensional, and that was frustrating. That was frustrating for me, because I found myself arguing with an inanimate object with an FDR.
I find myself arguing every week with a fixture difficulty. Yeah, I really do suffer with those 3 colours. I just can't get on with seeing fixtures looking green when quite frankly they're not, right?
Exactly. And I don't watch the game that way at all, right? So as a coach, I look for strengths and weaknesses in both teams, and different ways. Just because one team has a weakness doesn't mean the other team has a strength to exploit that weakness, right? So you have to look at both kind of like attacking and defending, and what they do well specifically within those realms, right? And then on top of that, you have to look at on what areas of the pitch that where they are weak, are doing certain things in specific areas of the pitch, and then you start to break it down granularly. But then the FDR, when you look at FDR, there's also no information there. Like red is not information, right? So that's another thing. That's one thing I love about, and I'm sure we're going to get to that. I love about your tables is you have these bars and you have actually data within the FDR reading, and I always felt like that was missing. So instead of what I first did, instead of just going re-examining or creating an FDR, I just started writing about it. And it came from there was an old NFL show called NFL Matchups Show, and it was back when I used to be into that barbaric sport. I'd watch it, and it was such a coaching show, and I thought I could kind of recreate that, like the coaching perspective for FPL managers. And I just started with some very basic data. I didn't have, at the time when I first started, I didn't have the memberships or I didn't know where to get the data. So I would just do it kind of on iTest, and I've been refining it, finding the resources, which will help our viewers here with. I just went refining it with those resources available.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest challenges I think you have though is that even data, it's not all there, is it?
No.
I think one of the things you talk about a lot is where teams are susceptible on the pitch. And of course, I think that data is available, but I think it's either extremely costly or we haven't quite worked out where it is.
Exactly. It is. And I've reached out to people on Scout, people on Hub, just to try to find this data. And the data is really XG from different areas of the pitch. This data is available. Opta does record that. But apparently what they all tell me is that it is very expensive, and it's just not a good investment for them as a business, which I understand. But if there are any wealthy benefactors out there that want to just throw that data our way,
maybe Jose Mourinho's watching, perhaps. Who knows? I'm sure I'm sure his coaching staff will be looking at that type of thing. But it's very interesting that ultimately what you're doing is you're starting with the lens, you're starting with your eye. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I think that's, for me, is very, very interesting, because we'll come to me in a little bit, but I'm very different to you on that point. I mean, your coaching side of things, you described to me how you would, just imagine you're back coaching kids again. How would you apply that to watching a game of football? And and you watch a lot of football, as I understand. How do you talk us through the thought process a little bit?
So yeah, you're right. I watch. I mean, I'm we're recording here, we're live at 7 a.m. I'm used to, I live in Los Angeles, so all the business I do is on the early side with the rest of the world. And then all the football I do is obviously on the early side. I wake up around 4:30. In fairness, I usually don't make it through the entire game of that early game. That's pretty damn early, but but the way I watch it and I explain it to kids, football is a battle for space, and I see these two organisms, almost like I envision two amoebas, and they're kind of like going around each other, battling for space, and eventually there will be penetration. And where there's penetration, then my interest is piqued. It's like, and then so I start to ask questions. Well, how did that penetration happen? Why did it happen in this situation on a specific side? Was it due to a mistake? Was it just a player error, or is it something more systemic? And these are the things that go through my mind as I watch the game. And as a coach, it was really my strength. And a player as well. I was never a very technical player. I wasn't a guy that could juggle the ball 100 times. I was never that player, but I understood space. And it's the same in my coaching. I teach players how to think and how to see the game from a 30,000 foot lens, in order to, like, when they get in there, it's like they have that there's that story of the goldfish or something, or the fish that doesn't know what it's surrounded by water. It's just like, we don't know really what our surroundings are until we kind of step outside them and then reinsert ourselves. So that's what I try to do with players. and that's how I watch games. So I see where the ball's ending up all the time, or where the ball is penetrating, and then I take that, and then I take that observation and I go to the stats, and I run down quite granularly. I run down all the stats. I use mostly FF Scout because of they just have the wide variety, this just incredible customization of stats. You can make your own tables, which I really appreciate. The tables I've been able to make have allowed me to kind of create the FDR that I want per the stats that I'm looking at. So yeah, then so after I look at the stats, then I bring it back into the game through narrative. So I start with a lens, then I get into the stats, and I go into kind of the reasons behind the observations, and then I translate into a narrative of it all together. I just put it all together in like a story.
Yeah, and we'll come to this a little bit later. You've been quite successful recently, certainly, and you've certainly given me food for thought with one or two things. So that's really, really interesting. I mean, look, obviously for the benefit of the people who are on, and I see there's quite a few on, so welcome everybody. I will say shout out a few people in a little while, but from my side, what interests me is you live in Los Angeles, so you must be doing, as I say, you're up at all times and falling asleep on the sofa, no doubt. But you're still managing to watch the football. Whereas me in Singapore, quite frankly, I'm a bit older than you. Probably need me, and I certainly need my beauty sleep more than you. And I don't. I've got to be honest. And someone once asked me why I don't play UCL fantasy. Well, I can't remember the last time I watched a UCL match because they're all in the middle of the week, and I've got to get up for work in the morning. So that's just not going to happen. So I just don't see the benefit in that. Whereas at least with FPL, I can catch at least, I think, 2.5 games a day at the weekend. That's roughly the sort of thing. But that still leaves a good chunk of the games which I don't see at all. And that's why I start opposite to you. I start with the stats. So I didn't get a chance to, we spoke earlier, I didn't get a chance to look, but I'm sure the guys in the comments will tell us. Think of a game in the last week or two which was complete crap, right? 0.1, 0.2 XG for both teams, a complete snorefest. I mean, you'd definitely be asleep on the sofa at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be asleep at 8 o'clock at night if it was 0.1. And if I had missed that game, I don't think I'd even bother watching the highlights. Quite frankly, I'd just go next. But then, if you've got a game where perhaps there's a team with an XG of 4. But then the actual goals are not 4. Of course, I'll watch it if it's 4 as well, because I like football at the end of the day. But if it's not 4, you've got to then think, why? And that's when you then dive in from the other angle. So ultimately, I use statistics as a starting point. And I think that's the first key difference, I think, for the viewers here.
Well, that's fascinating, right? Because we live on opposite sides of the world, of this globe, right? So we're watching things at exact opposite times, but we can watch. We are starting our FPL analysis on opposite sides of the FPL globe, and the things we've had so many conversations, right, about and it's usually midweek. Our conversations will usually start around like Wednesday or something like that, Wednesday or Thursday, and it's right. Our conversations are right at the meeting point, like right as we're crossing. I'm starting like eye test and your stats, and right as we're crossing, we meet there and we converse, and we're getting some really similar observations with two very different paths.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a merging of minds somewhere. I'm not quite sure how we do it. And I think you're going to tell me. I know you told me something this morning which has worried me deeply, considering I've just sold someone. So, so we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But so that's fun. That's fabulous. So that's the first little section. So I mean, What I was going to do now is I'm just going to just share a little bit of the statistics side, just so we're just going to give you the opposite. And I've got a few slides which I'm going to put up as I've always done. So if you just bear with me a second, I'll just move across. And here we go. So hopefully.
But while you're doing that, I'd also like to give a shout out. So it looks like we had some great engagement here
Who we got
in the live feed. So we got FPL Masha, we got Jinjo Yo, we have Tavindra Raj, Raja Agarwal from the GFCT chat. Hey Raja, what's going on?
Oh, nice. Yeah.
It's cool. It's really good to see everyone. Thanks for joining us.
It's absolutely lovely. So we've got FPL Zoo on there. So Joe,
Yep.
he's there. Yeah. It's nice to see everybody. Welcome everybody. I hope you enjoy it, and do get those questions in about game week 12 and the matchups that you might have within there, and any things you've got there. Not transfers. We'll do them tomorrow. Okay. Right. Okay. So on my side of things, so basically this is what I'm going to run through. So I'm going to start with the most important considerations from the perspective of statistics of FPL, and we're going to talk about how much data we use, team stats, player stats, and then scenario stats. And then perhaps give you an example of something that I know I did pick one player right this year. But I'm going to say, well, could we have actually really have picked this out? So let's have a quick look through this. And again, it should only take a couple of minutes. So the first thing is the range of data sets. And this is the key question, I think, here is how far do you go back? Now, everybody says, I haven't got enough data. But I would argue that I don't know that you need enough data, that much data at the moment, because we're in really uncertain times. We're in a period of COVID, and we're in a period of where there's no fans in the ground. So when did that start? Well, that started in June, wasn't it? When we went back after the lockdown, when we started playing end of last season. And of course, the results have been a little bit different, So as crowds return, are we going to see the likes of Burnley, Sheffield United, teams like that, with fairly, should we say, difficult places for teams to go to? Bramall Lane and Turf Moor. There's a Grimsby fan, I can remember going there and it being extremely intimidating. So I think we have to look at it from a perspective of how far do we go back. So I think for now, I think we don't need to go too far back, but obviously potentially in the future, we're going to have to change our thought process, and pretty quick. Thank goodness with the vaccines coming. We may well be in a point where we've got more than 2,000 fans back into the grounds in the not too distant future. But for now,
one thing that comes up for me as you're kind of talking about the range of data sets, once fans do come back, what do you do with the data of when they played without fans, when the teams played without fans?
Yeah, I think we still factor it in. I think we have to factor it in. I don't think we can ignore it. But I think what we might do is we might actually go back to last season and actually draw some historic data up for certainly. And then I think also what it's probably going to mean is that we actually do start to have home and away statistics with respect to fixture difficulty. Because at the moment, I don't have that. I just have one fixture difficulty based on the fixture, not on the basis of the home or away. Yes, I do separate matchups, attacker, defense against attack. But I don't consider home or away. And I think going forwards, as we get the fans back, clearly, it's much harder going to the Etihad, right? With fans, I would imagine, than not, although it's pretty hard going there anyway, I think, at the end of the day.
And then there are stadiums where it's probably the same. If you go to West Ham, maybe it's the same with fans.
Maybe West Ham, the Olympic Stadium there, the Library in London. Possibly. It's certainly not the most atmospheric of stadiums I've ever been to. I think that's the way I would put that. obviously we've got to think about, so moving to the stat that for the range then. So we're saying, okay, we can't go too far back, but what we've got to do is we've also got to consider what might be happening in the near term. So perhaps the lack of Richarlison, the lack of James and Luca Dean for Everton, that has a serious impact on them. And again, this is where the three colours just don't work, right? This is where you need shades of red, shades of green, okay, rather than the actual three-colour scheme. And then I just factor it in, you know, something like 20% from post-lockdown last season, 50% for the full this year, and then 30% for the last three game weeks. So that's roughly how I look at the range of the data sets themselves. And then I create a fixture difficulty. And the fixture difficulty is based around Ben Krellin's fixture difficulty from a range of 1 to 7, because I do actually subscribe to Hub. So I get that actually through them. So it's very easy for me to plug it into their planner so that I can actually look at it when I'm trying to plan my team as well. But yeah, what I'm looking at really is attack against defense. What's their XG? How many shots in the box? How many big chances? Okay. Against the opposite, against how many chances do you concede? What's their expected goals conceded? And ultimately, the darker the green or the darker the red, the better or the worse the fixture is. So you can see from there that Liverpool have quite unsurprisingly a really, really good fixture this week. Stand out good fixture. So I think you can know where I'm going as a captaincy this week. And Everton, on the other hand, against Chelsea, defensively, look potentially quite weak. And that is because just recently Everton have been, shall we say, I think pretty poor. They've certainly gone off a cliff from early parts of the season. At one stage, I was talking about bringing Everton defenders in. I most certainly wouldn't do now. So moving on. That's it. So the next stat that I look at, and it's something actually which I cut my teeth in FPL with, was actually the points per million with the rotation factored in. And when we talk about points per million, what's a good number? Well, I think for under 7 million, I would say 25 points per million. So you're looking about 175 points for a 7 million player. What did TAA get last year? I think 210. I mean, that was outstanding. I think he ended up at 7.7 million. Doherty, 167 points at 6.5, 25.7. So I think 25 ppm is actually a pretty good number. And then you take into account the rotation. And obviously, the more they rotate, the less valuable they are because they're not on the pitch. Okay. And then, obviously, once you get above 7 million, then it becomes a bit of a problem because clearly you can't run at 25 ppm. For example, Mo Salah at the moment is actually running at 24.6 at this moment in time. But Mane is only running at 16.1. So you could argue that Salah's probably doing better than last year because I think last year he averaged about, I can't remember, I think it was 20. I think it was 20 ppm, something like that. So I think in real terms, maybe even less than that. So from that perspective, Salah might go one way and Mane might go the other, but who knows? But what I would say, and I've highlighted Bamford there, at the moment, he's amazing value. And quite frankly, I still, whilst I own Bamford, I still struggle to think how he can carry on at this. Because if he does, he's going to break. He's going to make Lord Lundstrom look like a shadow of. He's
like a nobody. Like he's going to make Lundstrom look like Pookie.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Yeah, that's very true actually. So, okay, and then using the other stats, XG, XA, as I've mentioned, XI, which is adding XG and XA together. And one of the things you can do is look at talisman theory. So you're looking at talisman here, and Callum Wilson. The XG for Newcastle as a team isn't great, but he's involved in 52% of their XG. Chris Wood, just a shout out for Joe there. XG Burnley, obviously very poor of 8.6, but 50%. So which one would you go for there? You know, I know which one I would pick out of Wood and Wilson. So stats are stats, but then we've got to also think about the bigger picture. Okay. So I would always say talisman theory is always very, very important to consider as well, as is under and over performance. Okay. And this is something that I always talk about. Underperforming, okay, they're either poor or they're unlucky. Over, they're either fantastic or big fluky. So if you look there, you know, again, Chris Wood's due, okay, and you know, maybe he's going to do that. And one of your Little Prince picks due as well. Look, Trezeguet, right?
I picked Chris Wood in the five-a-side. No, sorry, in the six picks contest actually, since we were mentioning that last week, and didn't work out. But I also a player I identified as being due. One quick comment on what you were saying earlier about the value and the points per million, and of course the more premium the player is, the more difficult it is to reach your targeted points per million, and that's why we captain those expensive players. It's to double those points and increase the points per million and the value of those expensive players. No,
totally. I get you completely. So I mean, this is just a very brief run through. So I mean, we can take questions on this anytime. And here's the one which I said, you know, can we predict? This is for Craig, who sadly can't be with us tonight because he's actually busy. So I had to step in. But I had a little bet with Craig for a beer that Kurt Zouma would score against Sheffield. I think it was Sheffield United, actually, I said. But he scored the week earlier against Burnley. And if you look at this is actually a matrix that I've done for headed chances. And you can see what I've highlighted here for Chelsea. Clearly, they're green all across. And they've obviously got some fantastic service coming in. And, of course, they've got that man mountain in Kurt Zouma, who has the ability, quite frankly, I think is almost not possible to defend against these days, certainly the way he looks. And it's very unsurprising that he's getting the goals that he's getting. And I would argue that could we have actually predicted these goals? I think perhaps. And are we going to see another 3, 4, 5 goals to come? I would argue, looking at those, potentially we are. So he could be a really tasty target going forwards.
I love this lens that you're using. I started to look at headed chances. I started doing that last season, and I know a friend of mine at FPL Shark, Garth on Twitter there, he every time he wants a headed stat, he'll tag me. He's like, throw us a headed stat this way. People say that they are difficult to predict, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, but I agree, I think, more with you that if you look, there are certain teams that just concede a bunch of headed chances, and this was the case last season as well. Newcastle being among them last season, and they were by far and away the worst for defending headers. And there are teams that just really rely on those headed chances. Yeah. And
West Ham, one of those.
West Ham, yeah, for sure.
Potentially, West Ham look at quite an interesting prospect.
Shout out to the Souček owners. Keep an eye on Mariner's metric here, because he'll tell you when Souček is likely to bang.
But I sold it.
Yeah, that's right. That's
another story. But yeah, so okay, so that's my bit. So for now, what I'm going to do now, then I'll just move back to this. Gabe, I mean, just one question. Of course, we've spoken about stats and the lens and everything, and there's been one or two comments on Twitter in the last day or two about some of the experts coming for a bit of criticism, and maybe people taking it a little bit, I don't know, perhaps a bit too seriously. At the end of the day, it's just a game, right? But how much is luck and gut feel in all this?
I mean, it's a lot. It's honestly like we play this game of FPL, but we also play another game, and it's the game that we're engaging in right now, the analysis game. That's also a game, and subject to variance, and subject to sometimes it's a game of inches out there, and things just don't fall your way. And then you add the captaincy bit to that, where you're trying to it's a singularity where the points are doubled. That increases the variance. So I mean, we have to take all of that with the grain of salt. I think we were chatting the other day, and I was looking at my points, and my rank is extremely low. And then I looked at my captaincy points, and if I would just increase my captaincy points to just average, I would be inside 200K, which would be great. So I look at that and I say my process is good, and my captaincies have just been off, and I haven't gone rogue with the choices either. I've chosen high-priced, highly owned, highly captained players. I just chose them all on the wrong game week.
The wrong one, actually. Looking at it, I mean, I did the run on the metric the other day, and the metric I think it's got 174 now, and I've ignored the metric 2 or 3 times, and I'm on 194.
If I'm at 112.
Luck does come in. Bear in mind, last year I had the worst year with captaincy ever. It was absolute crap. So maybe it's just balancing it out. Who knows?
Did you have your metric last year?
No. I just used the tried and tested Chris rule of look at the odds.
And I think that's
bookies, generally speaking, aren't that wrong, are they? That's the way I always look at it. So that's why I sometimes look at those.
Yeah, I mean, but that's harkening back to the point that's the other game that we play. Is like the way we did things last year. We saw where we can improve, and you've created this whole incredibly detailed, informative metric, a FDR metric. And now your captaincy points are way better. If I would have followed your metric, I'd be inside the top 500,000.
I think there's an element of that. I think there's still an element of luck, though. I don't, it's about picking the right one at the end of the day. So what I was going to do then is I'm just going to have a quick look on the thing while you just set your screen up, and then I'll share it. So in the comments themselves. So we've got VJ, as we say, Joe. There's quite a few people on, actually. It's really nice to say. Suchek's FPL swing. Suchek against Sheffield United will be good. Yeah, I think he will. Yeah. Gabe's matchup made me captain DCL v Fulham with his headers conceded stats.
Headers. There we go.
Absolutely. All right, mate. So look, let me share your screen, and then we'll crack on. So hang on a second. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Whoa, there we go.
Sharing the wrong screen there.
Off you go, mate.
All right, here we go.
Manchester United. So now we're going to talk about Manchester United and Manchester City.
Yes. All right. So obviously, seemingly a difficult matchup for both teams, but I wanted to look, big game. So I just wanted to take a big game to show everybody. Just kind of like walk everyone through the maze that is my brain as I kind of write my matchups columns and as I watch the games and analyze the matches. So I decided to dissect the Manchester Derby from an FPL matchups perspective. So here we go. So this kind of represents the eye test when I watch both of these teams play. No surprise on. On the one side, we have the chances created heat map for United, and on the left side, on the right side, we have the chances conceded heat map for City. Obviously, Bruno works his magic in that area. We all know, right on top of the box, he creates chances from there. He steps inside and scores from there as well. And you can see the red and the green heat map right in the same area of City. So what this tells me, and I've seen it before, we've seen it actually in seasons past, when City have been vulnerable defensively, it's when teams are able to quickly, so City are usually in possession with the ball, high up the pitch, and it's usually in transition. When they lose possession, their D mids, the defensive midfielders, are usually pushed up a little bit high, so the opposing team gets into that space between the back line and the defensive midfielders. And we can see this this vulnerability in City, and how the matchup against United, Bruno specifically, it could be quite dangerous on that front. So that's just kind of like the first eye test and observation I make. Then we flip it, and we have the Manchester United chances conceded heat map, and then we have the Manchester City chances created heat map on the right. The one thing, so here we see Kevin De Bruyne's creativity stands out right away all around the box. We see the kind of like the purple or blue lighter areas inside the box for where Kevin De Bruyne maybe slips Raheem Sterling in there, or when Mahrez does his cutbacks on the edge of the box there, on that left side of the box. And then we compare kind of Kevin De Bruyne's action there on the outside of the box with the chances conceded heat map for United. And I want to draw your attention to a couple things. First of all, the cluster of green dots on the right side of United's defense. So it's the left side of your screen, but if you're looking from United's perspective, it's on their right flank. That's where Aaron Wan-Bissaka is playing. And Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I know he's much loved in the community and in England as well, but he's not having a great season, I have to say. Attacking wise, I haven't been impressed. I don't think he can cross the ball very well. I don't think he's very technical with his touch. I think he recovers really well, but he is, and I don't know why. I can't explain why. It could be he may not have confidence in Lindelof inside, or he may not have confidence in the attack and maybe pushes forward too much. This, I think I'd have to watch a little more to understand that. But we can see all those chances being created on the right side. And then the other thing I want to draw your attention to is the line of blue-purple dots basically from sideline to sideline, right on the edge of United's box. See 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 dots right there, and that's where De Bruyne just like hangs out and creates. So I think this is the weakness that I see in United as they face Manchester City. Obviously, any team that faces Manchester City, their weakness is going to be City's strength, which is De Bruyne. But this weakness is highlighted because United already give up chances in that area of the field. So after the eye test, we look at the stats. Now I'm using the last 4 game weeks here. And these are, so as I'm going through all of the stats, these jump out at me, and I'll explain why. So the last 4 game weeks, the goal attempts I put up there seems unremarkable, but it's remarkable to me in how close they are with their goal attempts. And then to follow kind of my train of thought here, from the goal attempts, we look at the goal attempts in the box, and understandably, City have a significantly, maybe about 20% more than United do. But then when you look at goal attempts on target, United have quite a few more goal attempts on target. So City is getting in the box a lot more, but not getting the ball on target as much. And United is not getting in the box as much, but they're getting the ball on target. We look at their goals, 10-8 in the last 4. Both of them have been very prolific. You'd have to watch the games to see how those goals have come. And then we look at the shot accuracy, and we know shot accuracy is something that City need to improve on. And this is where we have to decide as kind of investors in these players, if we think that's going to improve, if we think the upcoming fixtures will make it easy for them to improve, and if we just believe in the players to improve. We may just think that Sterling is just not a good finisher, and this is the kind of shot accuracy rates that we're going to need to get used to. Again, the goal conversion rate is quite low as well. United certainly doing much better than City on that front. Also, United doing better than City on big chances, 16-13. XG very slightly, and then XG delta. And this is where kind of it all blows up. The XG delta is kind of speaking to form that you were talking about, Chris, earlier, if they're overperforming or underperforming their stats. So United is overperforming their stats. They've scored approximately 2 more goals than they should have. So they should be right at 8 goals with City per their expected stats. So that we can see it as from an attack perspective. City attack more, or sorry, United attack more, but and maybe I'm sorry, United attack about the same as City, but they are a little bit more efficient. But it's what's that turning into, right? And so this gives us only like half the picture here. I'm looking at these stats, and right now in my thought process, I still won't have understood very much. So then I move over to the matchups, and I've taken the matchups they've played, and what I do is I look at XG and big chances. XG conceded and big chances conceded, because we're looking at the defensive matchups here, and I've kind of just done a rough tally. We were under the impression, because of that FDR that we were talking about, that frustrating, really unidimensional FDR, and we thought that Manchester City had the tougher matchups, and now their matchups are getting easier. Well, it turns out that the defenses they've played have actually turned out to be weaker than the defenses that United have played. We look at teams like Leicester, for example. We thought their defense would be a little bit more stout. They have been susceptible. Teams like on the flip side, on the other side for United, when they started out, Palace has, I think, started out the season to be better than we thought. Brighton has good defensive stats, but bad defensive production, and so on. So I put them all together just to see who's had the easier schedule to balance things out. So right now I'm looking at this data, and I'm thinking that for the attack, it's somewhat even. So I just kind of make a mental note, and I move on to the flip side here. Now we're looking at the defense for Manchester United and Manchester City, and then we'll take a look at the matchups. And here we're seeing really the separation. So goal attempts conceded. Obviously, United concede much more. Goal attempts in the box more than double than what City concede. That one stands out quite a bit because it's so different. Goal attempts on target is double now, and then once I look at kind of overall goal attempts and shots in the box, then I look at the chances from the different areas of the field, and this is where I would love, again, shout out to anyone that wants to go and buy XG data. We will be your best friend over here. But for now, I just have chances conceded, which is a weak stat, which is why we need to qualify it with the eye test and with other kind of surrounding stats as well. But it gives us an idea. Look, we have the left 9-8, we have the center 8-9, and then we have the right 13-3. There's the outlier. So that really sticks out, right? So we can expect City to probably, Pep has access to this data and more. We can expect City to maybe, focus down their left side. So are we thinking maybe it's another game for Sterling again? I don't know. Like it's just something to keep in mind as we continue going through the stats. In the last 4 game weeks, United have conceded double the big chances that City have conceded. They have a much higher expected goals conceded. Well, yeah, about 1, and they've conceded 1 more goal than City has conceded. You can see the delta there is close enough to 0 to say that they are performing to their stats. And then again, we go over to the matchups, and then there's obviously the attacking matchups for those teams. So as far as attacking goes, United have faced an average of about the 11th best attack, and City have faced an average of about the 13th best attack. So quite close, just off by the kind of 2 levels there. And I think that they're close enough where they wouldn't account for City outperforming United defensively. So right now we're starting to get a more complete picture. Offensively, probably about the same, but when we think about the teams offensively, I think we would say that City has not been performing to their potential, and they are on the up. And United are inconsistent. They could come out and play like Burnley, or and I think I forget who it was on Twitter that, that said, is United without Bruno basically Burnley? And I think they kind of are, if we're being honest. Apologies to all United fans. Um,
But hopefully United with Bruno's okay, because I've got both Bruno and KDB. So I'm actually quite heartened by what you said. I'm particularly keen on KDB. And I think it's food for thought for those people who are perhaps selling it, people who have on double up of Man City now. Maybe there's food for thought there. It's maybe not to necessarily wipe Sterling out at this moment. But who knows? We'll see.
yeah, and I'll be honest. I sold Sterling. And we'll get to that later. We'll get to like the Salah conversation later. But as far as this game goes, and we'll get to kind of like we'll put it all together in the end here. So we have the offense, we have the attack, we have the defense, we have the matchups, and then if we put the attack and the defense together, just to kind of compare side by side here, um, and remind us of what those conclusions were. So we're looking here, offense, defense, and then we get to the conclusion. So after we've seen the eye test, we've gone through the stats, we've kind of like gone through our thinking of what we know about the teams, and this is what I see. So this is kind of how my matchups articles start to be. This is how the writing begins. And this starts as just bullet points, and then I turn it into narrative. So, Manchester United conceding 30 shots inside in the box, combined with 13 chances from the right side in the last 4 game weeks, is a nice recipe for Sterling. So they concede a lot of shots in the box. Sterling is very good at taking the space and just getting those extra meters so to get inside the box. That's a good recipe for Sterling. It's a good matchup for him on that side. So I like Sterling in this week if you're playing any kind of daily fantasy, or if you decided to keep, if you have other fires, I actually think it could work out for you this week. Then second point, chances conceded heat map for United shows a line. That's that line we talked about, the line of the blue, the bluish purple right across the top of the D of the box, where KDB really does his damage there. I like him. He loves from there. He slips players in. If we're getting the wing backs involved, he'll slip them in, or it can be Mahrez or Ferran Torres or Sterling that he can get inside there. So I like and then I like KDB to create something in this match. And then we go to the stat that you were talking about, Mariner, is the XGI, the goal involvement, right? So we were looking at I think the 50%. I think Callum Wilson was around 50%.
Yeah, it was.
But they've scored I think 10 goals or 8 goals. So that turns out to 4. Well, City have scored 8 goals in the last 4 game weeks, and Kevin De Bruyne has almost a 50% goal involvement. So if which is great news, right?
Yeah, this one, yeah, absolutely, yeah, definitely.
So if I like Sterling to do something from that susceptible from United's susceptible right side, and I like De Bruyne to create from the susceptible top of the D that is United, and I like both these players. So if I like both of them, I'm probably thinking that this game's going to have more than a goal from City. I'd say probably 2 goals, and I expect Kevin De Bruyne to be involved in 50%. So in at least one of those goals. Then Man City have a great defense this season, but their Achilles heels is that space. And the first heat map that we looked at, the Achilles heel of that defense is the space between Rodri, Gundo, and the 2 center backs. This is, again, similarly to KDB on that side. On the flip side, this is I like for Bruno to do something here as well. His goal involvement, I don't have it up here for United. I don't remember what it is, but it's quite high for United as well. And then lastly, both the teams have conceded the joint second most penalty kicks this season. 4.
Oh, Bruno then.
So Bruno and KDB, because they both conceded 4. So I
own them both.
You own them both. So you can't go wrong there. So that's kind of it. That's the process from eye test to stats to comparison to matchups to narrative.
Cool. No, I have to say, and I've been reading the comments, I think, people are saying it's like a lecture, and I'm actually listening for once.
Well, I have a teacher by trade, so I'm glad to have people listening for once.
Right. Okay. So we're actually good. We're 50 minutes. We're gonna have to whiz through. So I'm just gonna whiz through my captain metric, and then we'll take some questions, because we can always take questions on the captain metric at any time. So we really want to get questions for you. So very, very briefly, I'm just going to look at the captain metric for this week. And whoops, oh dear, what have I done? There we go. Let's try again. And there we go. And unsurprisingly, given the fixture difficulty, Mo Salah is top. And bear in mind, he's got the 2+ returns. He's got those hauls. He's got his consistency of returns. He's also got decent expected points, and he's got a very, very tasty fixture. And the only reason that Mane is slightly behind him is just not quite so consistent. And I think that's partly due to penalties. So I think both of those are really, really good options this week. Hopefully they both play. KDB third, Fernandes fourth. I don't think I need to go much more detail than that, actually.
It explains itself a little bit there, doesn't it?
There's an article out there about the metric anyway as well, so people can always read that. Werner fifth, interestingly enough.
He's been flattering to deceive his owners. I feel bad for Werner owners.
Flatter. I can't quite decide. It's deceiving to flatter or flattering to deceive. I mean, to be honest, the only person I've ever seen miss a chance easier than that was my son once at small-sided football, where he managed to miss from about 6 inches. I think he's on that as well.
My son was rolling on the floor, laughing for 5 minutes when I showed him that still.
Yeah, ridiculous, right? So that's very, very quick. I've whizzed through that because obviously I want to get to the questions really. So just to finish then, I'm happy to take questions from the community, and we'll just have a look, see what we've got. Just whilst I'm checking, there was a question on Twitter about your thought process on Mahrez last week. You called that he was going to blank, and he did. Do you want to just give us a quick view on that?
Yes. So I called. I wasn't sure that he would blank, but with the previous week against Burnley, the whole talk was that Mahrez played. It was a tactical decision that Mahrez played, and Pep always plays Mahrez against Burnley. I didn't realize that until after the match, and so I decided, and it was thanks to a conversation with the FPL escapades, that when they were asking me what I thought about Mahrez, and I said, hold on, let me take a look here, and then I saw something that was concerning for me, and I have to give Mahrez a lot of credit as well. So if we could just share the screen I have up here, Mariner. All right, there we go. So this was the original tweet here. It's the Fulham chances conceded over the last 2 game weeks, and we see this gap right here, right where Mahrez does his damage. So this is why I thought he was a bad tactical selection. You see the cluster of chances created here, where the box meets the end line. Perfect for a right-footed player to come in and send crosses in, and then we see the successful chances. These are the chances that created that led to an assist in green. This is all where Sterling does his damage. So I thought just tactically this was a better matchup for Sterling than for Mahrez. So and it worked out. What Mahrez did, to his credit, he dropped here. See these dots here. Mahrez dropped super deep, and he almost created a couple of chances from this area of the field. That's something we haven't seen Mahrez do too much. So I give him a lot of credit for. And maybe Pep credit as well for identifying that and asking him to drop deep. So I will say he was unlucky not to return an assist, but he was nowhere near close to sniffing any goals, and that was kind of the point that I was making. Then the question came up, was like, well, if that was the case for Mahrez, is it the same case for Salah? And I don't see it as the same case for Salah, and this is why on the image here to the right, this is a response to @FPL_Tater. who asked that question, and several others. I know FPL Giroud has posted about like, oh, well, this means Mahrez it's not a good matchup for Salah either. I see it a little bit differently. So Mahrez plays in Pep's system that is more rigid as far as positioning goes. Pep, comes from the Barcelona system. There's that famous Thierry Henry video that the wingers must stay wide in that Pep system, at least until the ball is played out there, to keep the defense spread out. If they come inside before the ball is played, then the gaps in the defense will close and there won't be any room for penetration. So in Klopp's system, it's quite different. Salah, first of all, Salah has many more tools in his arsenal than Mahrez does. He's just a better player. So Salah is given more room to roam. So you see Salah will drop deeper and more central than Mahrez does to create play. So he creates a lot of times from that deep lying position, and then Salah's heat map here, it's just kind of all over the place. Obviously all on that right side, but more in the middle. You got more action back here towards the center circle as well. You got more action kind of right in here outside the box as well. And then this is the big one, where Mahrez pulls up outside the box for his chances here. Salah gets inside the box. And then obviously add penalties to that. So one, he has more freedom of movement in Klopp's system. Salah has the ability to penetrate first before creating the chance, and he's just a better player. So I think that the cases are, whereas the tactics are the same, the matchup is the same, the situation is different because the player is different.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. I mean, that's really good, and it's a shame. I mean, there's loads of questions coming in, but everything's about, do I bring X, Y, and Z in as I thought would happen. So I think we've given plenty of people a lot of food for thought tonight, and I think that's brilliant. So I mean, we're coming up to an hour, so I think we probably need to wrap up. I need to go and get some beauty sleep. I think it's been fantastic having you on.
This is fun, and again, I just want to thank all the people that are joining us. I'm kind of a little blown away by all the presence we have here. Joe makes a good point, actually, that one of the reasons Mahrez had trouble there, and this is something I learned about Fulham, is the left-sided center back has a long name, Ade something, is better than the right-side center back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So no, it's right. So let's wrap up. As I say, thank you very much, mate. I do hope it's not the last time that we see you on the show.
I hope to be back.
And I'm sure you've got a load of new fans as a result of tonight. And, I really think that it's super valuable to the people. As I say, you can find Gabe at the Road to Global Glory blog, which is, you can find from Twitter. In fact, I think you find it linked off my Twitter account. You obviously find him at FPL Lens on Twitter as well. I'm FPL Mariner, so you can find us, and you can obviously find at FPL Expectations as well, where there's people like Joe and Philosophy and the rest of the gang. So, Gabe, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you.
So, okay, that's it, everybody. I understand that the guys will be on tomorrow to do the normal show. I may be, I may not. Depends what times whether they record or they go live. And at the moment, we haven't decided. But thanks very much, and have a great night. Goodbye.